John Russell. I used to be known as John Russell Penn, so I'm not hiding that fact. We're here today to try to put together what this case of the Camp Scott murders is all about. At this point, the state of Oklahoma has not recognized any investigation into the facts that I have presented to them on numerous occasions, starting back in March, I believe, of 2011. We have a panel here today that are going to be listening to some of the facts, some of the things that we have to say, and they will have an opportunity to raise their questions. I chose a panel simply because I want to get questions from ordinary citizens. If they have something that they feel needs to be addressed, I want those questions to be recorded. And Rick Busey, I usually call him Gary Busey, but it's Rick Busey. He is an ex-homicide detective. He's worked cold cases before, and we have brought him on as consultant and also investigator in the case. A lot of people have said that, aren't you afraid of lawsuits? And I say to those people, I've been doing this for 35 years now, trying to get the state of Oklahoma to address these issues, and not once has anyone threatened me with any lawsuits. Not once has anyone spoken with me concerning the allegations that I've made. It's very curious to me that in all cases up to this point, anyone with any information, the law enforcement would normally question the person, and if it was true or not true, to try to decipher what was truth and what was a lie. At this point, no one has done that, and I know the reason why that is, simply because the state of Oklahoma is trying to put a stop to any investigation as far as the Camp Scott murders. This is not fair to those 3 girls who were murdered, or to the other 8 people that were raped and murdered. It's certainly not fair to the parents today that are still alive. Walt Milner is the only one that has passed away, and he was a former Tulsa police officer. But Betty Milner and Sherry and Dr. Farmer, Charles Farmer, and also the Busey parents are still alive. I think it's only fair to them for some answers. And at this point, nothing has been done. They have addressed that they've sent 200 pieces of evidence off to Virginia for new testing. And I say to them, I have predicted that when they do come back, if they ever do come back with an answer, it's going to be that everything was inconclusive. That's been their mantra this whole time. Anytime that anything was brought up as far as testing DNA, it was always it was inconclusive, or it was too old, or we didn't have enough DNA. And to those people I say, that's really a spin for this situation, because even though back in 1977 on June 13, when this all happened, they had plenty of DNA at that point. DNA is tested and a graph is made where markers on that graph show what the DNA of that particular individual was at that time. You don't have to keep the original DNA when you've got a graph with the markers. All you have to do is test for the new DNA of potential suspects, which in this case I'm naming as Carl Myers. And his name is Carl Lee Myers. He was a known pedophile in that he had done time for raping 2 little girls. He was a known serial killer, and this can, if you Google anything about Carl Lee Myers, that's what you're going to come up with. And eventually he was put on death row for the rape and murder of 2 women in Tulsa County. I don't think it was Tulsa County, I think it was Rogers County, excuse me. But he was put on death row, where he eventually, 2 years ago, passed away from a brain tumor while he was on death row. So the state of Oklahoma didn't get their, their pound of flesh. But those are the things that we're going to be addressing. I'd like to start out with saying that this is all about the Camp Scott murders, where 3 little girls who were attending a Girl Scout camp called Camp Scott were raped and murdered in a vicious way. At the time when they discovered the bodies that morning, they found the bodies. 2 of them were in sleeping bags. The other, Doris Milner, was outside, exposed to the elements. They were bound, taped. They were bludgeoned to death, and of course they found out that they had been raped. What is not normally out there for the public to know, that all 3 girls, and I'm getting my information from an ex-OSBI agent that was involved, all 3 girls had been violated in all 3 orifices. Most people think they were just raped vaginally, but they were traumatized both vaginally, anally, and orally. So there was a lot of DNA left there. They tried to say that a full-blood Cherokee Indian by the name of Gene Leroy Hart was their suspect. But if anyone will investigate, that occurred on the very first day when Sheriff Pete Weaver of Mays County had stated, when he saw the bodies and saw the bindings that the person used to tie them up, he said, that's just like Gene Hart tied up those 2 pregnant women in Tulsa County. Well, of course, we know that Sheriff Weaver had no jurisdiction in Tulsa County, would probably have never come across the facts in those 2 rapes, simply because it wasn't in his jurisdiction. He wouldn't have had any interest in that case, not being in his county. But yet he, right off the very first day, he named Gene Hart as a possible suspect. Well, everyone wanted to jump on that. The reason why they wanted to jump on that is because the actual killer was protected. And he was protected by different individuals, not only in law enforcement, but also in the court system, even as high as the House of Representatives for Ottawa County. I'll name some of the names, and if they think I'm trying to goad them or push them into suing me, you're right. That's what I'm trying to do. Because if we can get in court, I can have power of subpoena. And with power of subpoena, I can subpoena FBI records. I can subpoena different individuals that had knowledge of what was going on. And what was going on was large drug running through northeastern Oklahoma. And we're not talking about a suitcase full. We're talking about 18-wheeler trailers full of drugs. At the time, when I went to the FBI and told them of my concern, safety for myself and my family, Agent Mark Young with the FBI was assigned to me, and the agreement was that they would try to give me protection only if I would cooperate with them in gathering information and evidence together about the drug running. At that time, I agreed, and I was even allowed to carry a 9mm weapon, even though I'd been convicted of a felony before, which is against the law. I think that can be proved because I asked him to run the serial numbers on that gun. He told me that it was clean, it hadn't been used in any felony or robbery or killings. At that time, I agreed. I did go out. I did receive information from a man named Chris Chrisman, who told me the story about what was going on in Ottawa County and surrounding counties. In that, he did name Carl Myers as their hitman. Basically, anyone that got in the way of the drug running, which we're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars, they did not want that anyone to interrupt that, simply because these people that were protecting it were getting their cuts. And I'll name some of the names right now simply because I want it recorded. We're talking about House Representative, and I can't even remember his name right now, I'm kind of stuck. But we're also talking about Bill Melton, who was the police chief at that time. We're talking about the sheriff, Floyd Ingram. We're talking about Pete Weaver, who had a personal interest in making sure that Gene Hart was named. We're talking about bondsmen, lawyers, judges, Judge Sam Fullerton, Judge Douthat. It goes on and on and on. But the names that I turned over to the FBI, there was 27 names on that list, if I remember correctly. But how far it went, there was also at least one OSBI agent, which was Roger Chris. That was working with the OSBI, who had a personal interest in taking kickbacks from the drug running. William Schuline, that was the House Representative. And as we go along, different members that were involved have died off, but there's still some that are still left that knew of Carl Myers' involvement, knew that Carl Myers was the actual killer, but yet tried to focus all the attention on Gene Hart. I'm not saying that Gene Hart was not there, but Gene Hart had a MO, or a modus operandi, of burglaries, stealing. His only purpose in that camp was to try to ransack little girls' luggage and their knapsacks and for money. Back then, transistor radios, that's how dated we are. That was why he was there. But it was Carl Myers and the potential that there was a woman there, and I believe her name was Imogene Busby, simply because she was connected so much with Carl and Earl Busby and also Gene Hart. These were running buddies. So for the fact that some say that, well, they're counties apart. Well, there were only 2 counties apart. But when, the old saying that birds of a feather flock together, well, people are involved in breaking the law, in theft, rapes, murders, whatever. They do flock together. That's how I got involved in this thing, in that I was arrested for some check charges, and while I was in the county jail, and I knew about Carl Myers, I knew of his name simply because Chris Chrisman told me about him, but then I was in the actual jail with him when they brought him back in for trial. He got drunk one night and started spilling his guts about the different people that he had killed, and he did mention the Camp Scott incident. However, the next day, when you're in a situation like that, you don't ask a lot of questions because people get leery of, what, are you trying to, be a snitch or whatever? So, but one of the inmates that was there said something about the Camp Scott murders, and he immediately came off the hinge and threatened the guy, never mentioned it again. So that was a real touchy subject with him. Why he bragged about the others and wasn't concerned about them, I have no idea. But I believe it was because he was being protected and he had no worries about that. Camp Scott was in a different county. He didn't have protection on that. I believe that's the whole reasoning why he was so upset about talking about the Camp Scott murders. Eventually, they did keep Gene Hart as their main suspect. And I will say right now, Carl Lee Myers' name was never brought up in any investigations up to the time when I contacted Stan Florence, the new OSBI director, gave him the name of Carl Myers, gave him the full story, and this was 4 months before we even announced that we were going to be doing an audition for a film. People say, why am I doing a film? Well, I'm at this point right now that I felt that no one's listening, no one's investigating, and the only way I could force the state of Oklahoma to investigate is to put out a film like that and have normal citizens asking, why not? Why haven't you investigated it? why wasn't Carl Meyer's name at the top of the list? Like Stan Florence said, his very words was, this guy was quite a character, wasn't he? He said he should have been right at the top of the list as a suspect. Those are the things that we're dealing with here. Eventually they did catch Gene Hart, and after a 10-month manhunt, they took him to trial and found him not guilty. The jury members that were questioned about it stated that they were pretty sure that Gene Hart was involved, but the one thing that they all agreed upon was that he didn't do it by himself if he did it. That's never been investigated. It's always been the contention of the state of Oklahoma, the OSBI, and that Gene Hart did it, and he was the only one that did it. The reason why they do that, simply because if they had 2 or 3 others as possible suspects, they would have to continue the investigation. They wanted this case ended. They wanted to use Gene Hart as the scapegoat, and where his name alone would be investigated. Some of the other names that were involved was OSBI agent Mike Wilkerson, Larry Bowles, I've already mentioned Roger Crisco, and there's several other agents that was mentioned in the list that I gave to the FBI. I'm going to stop right now, take a little interview, allow the panelists to ask us questions, and we'll come right back to you in just a moment.